This is a special edition of WPTV To The Point.
The coronavirus pandemic has affected every aspect of our society and taken a historic toll on our local communities, our state, our nation, and the world. You have questions, everything from reopening our local communities to loans and unemployment. Also, the availability of some basic supplies. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of To The Point. I'm Shannon Cake, in for Michael Williams. Tonight, we're taking your questions, getting them answered by Florida's senior senator from Miami. I want to welcome in now Republican Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, thank you for your time. We appreciate you being with us this evening.
Thanks for doing this.
Senator, we met with you right here in our studio some 5 weeks ago. We talked about shortages in everything from testing to PPE to toilet paper. Frankly, there is still some big concerns in all three categories. How far have we come in your estimation, and where have we really fallen short?
Well, I think we've come somewhat to a good direction when it comes to testing now. It's not as widely available. The rapid testing is really the one that's most important because it's the one that most would help frontline workers in the healthcare industry to make sure that they're not infected and that they're not spreading it, but ultimately everybody. And the capacity exists. Now it's just a question of deploying enough of those tests, and that's why I'm hopeful that this new bill out of Congress is going to provide billions of dollars more to develop and make that available. The protective gear, it's still a challenge. You know, this stuff is only made in a handful of places. We have more companies in America that don't normally make it making it. That's gotten better, but it's still not good enough. On the toilet paper, I can't help you. There's no shortage of that. It's just people buying it, and it's nuts. You know, I mean, they're just a run on it that's unbelievable, and all paper products at this point.
All very serious topics, and we'll do deeper dives driven by our audience feeding us some questions here throughout this next 20 minutes or so with you, Senator. But the topic really on everybody's mind: how do we really reopen safely without causing this bigger problem in our communities, fanning the flames of this viral spread? The NBC Wall Street Journal poll just over the weekend shows that most Americans in the nation right now, they're fearing lifting restrictions too soon.
Yeah, so let's start by acknowledging that we've never done this before, ever. Not us, not any other country. So there's really no model to follow. I hear a lot of people out there saying, you know, let's keep it the way it is for as long as possible until the virus is under control. And I think theoretically that's the right approach. It's just not a realistic one. Here's what you need to think through, and everyone needs to think through. As time goes on, it's going to get harder and harder to get compliance, meaning more and more people are going to start pushing back against it. Some through these protests, but a lot of people just do their daily behavior. I mean, it's increasingly people are going to start pushing the edges of it as they grow tired of it. And that's the reality. And we need to understand that we are on the clock when it comes to public officials to do what we can, because eventually we're going to have to reopen to some degree, whether we want to or not, just given the impatience that's out there by a growing number of people. And the way you reopen as safely as possible is, number one, you have rapid testing available and you deploy it so that we can find people and isolate them and contact trace all the people they came in contact with. Number two is you build up your capacity. We use this time to increase the ability of our hospitals to handle patients so they're not overwhelmed if we get hit by a second wave, God forbid. Number three is you try to set up systems to protect the most vulnerable. And that begins, in my view, with not just the elderly and people with health conditions, but the most vulnerable are doctors and nurses and frontline workers who are being exposed to multiple people with a virus on a daily basis. That gets back to your question about personal protective equipment and the like. And of course, one of the best things that we could see happen over the next few weeks is the establishment of an effective antiviral treatment that doesn't cure it, but keeps people off ventilators or keeps people out of ICUs. That would be a big, big development. There's been some promising findings over the last few weeks, and we hope that can continue to happen. And then that can become widely available. So look, it's a tough challenge. It's going to happen at the local level. It's going to be different in different places. And we've never done this before, but I think that's the right balance to pursue.
As for that antiviral, 5 weeks ago when we talked with you, you said we were maybe 60 to 90 days out. You were hopeful. Are we still on track? Have we sped that up?
Well, look, I'm not a scientific researcher, so I only go based on the information I'm provided. And I'm almost reticent to mention any medicines because, you know, people go out there and if it's an existing medicine, demand more of it. But I know this, the brightest minds on the planet are trying a variety of different things and a variety of things together. And we're seeing some good results on some of them. And hopefully we can have some protocol established now that they've treated enough patients. So I do think that over the next 15 or 20 days, we'll be able to tell doctors, here's what's worked best so far. and they can begin to use it, and that's available. Because
So
remember, that has to be made by somebody and deployed.
the critical component, the key to all of this is the testing. Everybody in the medical community and thought leaders agree with that. 5 weeks ago, you said the rapid testing was coming. We are still waiting. In many cases, local hospitals, one hospital has rapid testing, another hospital does not, right here in South Florida. So the question on testing comes from Christina right here in our area, and she asks, how can Florida decide what to do next regarding reopening when there are not enough tests available for all Floridians, and most of the tests being done right now are not the rapid tests?
Yeah, it's even more complicated than that. And that is, some of the tests are being done in private labs. And in fact, the majority of them are. The results take long to come back. So the perfect world is that everybody would have this test that gives you a result in 15 minutes, right? And that's available now, but it's only available in a certain amount because the production isn't up to scale, and it's being limited to certain places. So some places have it, some places don't. And that's exactly right. The goal is not just to develop that test, but to develop more tests like it. So it's not just a one company monopoly, and then to deploy it, to get it out there to as many places as possible. And that's what we should be using this time to do, because that question is right. Until we have that in place, it's going to be very hard to move towards an opening of any sort without some of that in place. So that's what I think we should be using our time on right now as much as anything else.
And will you urge the administration to do just that, using all of its power?
Yeah, so I mean, the one thing the federal government can do, in addition to waiving FDA requirements to make it faster from a regulatory standpoint, is provide funding for it. And that's what this deal that's come up with here, that provided additional money as well for the small business loans. That's what it includes, is more money, not just for more production and ordering of these tests, but also for hopefully innovating more tests like it. There shouldn't just be one type of rapid test.
Another question you're hearing a lot from the front line, your healthcare workers, first responders right here in South Florida, that there is still this scarcity of PPE. It's almost unthinkable that we're in this state. And Keith, right here from our area, wrote in asking this of you, Senator: how difficult is it to make N95 masks? Isn't America, he says, the most powerful country in the world with the most advanced military technology? How is it that we're in this situation?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is that, yes, it's not that it's difficult to make, it's the demand. It's a global demand from all over the world. It's every state, every community, every hospital. So despite the ability to make it, the demand is outstripping the supply. That's the challenge. And so that's exactly why in the future we need to have bigger stockpiles. But in the short term, we've tried to encourage and have gotten more companies into the business of making these sorts of things. But this is more of a supply and demand issue. No matter how fast you try to ramp up production, the demand is extraordinary, and the prices in some cases are through the roof.
And so
for many weeks.
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, just that for many weeks you saw states bidding against each other,
right,
and even international clients and customers. And a lot of this existing capacity was made overseas, and those countries are not allowing it to leave their countries because they need it. Every country in the world is facing this challenge.
So wouldn't that mean, and it would make a lot of sense to invoke the Defense Production Act in cases like masks, N95 masks, and other supplies like swabs and even the medicine? At one point, we couldn't get hydrochloroquine here in Florida.
Well, those are two different topics. On the medicines, you need the active ingredients. And unfortunately, this nation, and I've been warning about this for over 2 years, we're very dependent on China and to some extent on India for the basic ingredients, the active ingredients that go into the making of these medicines. On the issues of all the other things you mentioned, many of the companies that would have, look, I'm in favor of invoking the Defense Act, and it's kind of confusing because some people claim it already has been invoked. Bottom line is companies are now doing that stuff anyways. But again, that's not what they normally do. That's not their normal line of business. It's taken them time to ramp up production, and no matter how fast they're moving, the supply is not enough to keep up with the demand. I mean, understand these are disposable gear in many cases, and it's a real challenge. We can never be in this position again, but we have to do everything we can right now to ramp up production. It's an all hands on deck situation.
And in that vein, is it time, Senator, to start bringing manufacturing home? Understanding, of course, we're dealing with a crisis at the moment, but looking to the future very quickly, is it time to start manufacturing again in this country?
Yeah, but it was time to do that 2.5, 3 years ago when we started talking about it. You can't be, a nation needs to have an industrial capacity. And we made policy decisions over the last 25 years in the United States that allowed this industrial capacity to move overseas because it was cheaper. There are some things that are so important to our nation that we have to have the ability to make it, even if it doesn't make market sense. We've got to put those incentives in place. I gave a speech about this and issued a report on this a year and a half ago. It's not just medical equipment gear. It's everything from telecommunications to rare earth minerals, which you need for advanced technology. Our nation has given up on those because China has undercut us and they've subsidized it, and we have to reverse that. The market will always give you the most efficient outcome. That's why I believe in capitalism. But every now and then, the most efficient outcome is not in our national interest. And that's where you have to create the incentives to bring that sort of capacity back to our country.
We got another question here for you, Senator, from an essential service worker. Laura out of Coral Springs wrote, I demand Senator Rubio and Senator Scott support an essential workers' Bill of Rights. That statement, that demand, Senator, sounds rather desperate.
Well, I imagine what they're referring to in Bill of Rights is the certain equipment that they should be provided by their employer coming into work and so forth. I would say a couple things. Many employers are stepping up and doing more. Again, this is new for them as well. The truth of the matter is that part of it is the same supply issue that we're talking about. And that is, if you talk about PPE equipment and so forth, it's first going to go to hospitals and medical providers before it goes to anybody else. But I think we need to get to a point where that stuff is available, not just now, but in the future for everyone who's being asked to go to work every day and exposing themselves to this. So as we look towards at some point reopening our economy, the virus is still going to be out there until a vaccine exists to protect us against it. And those are exactly the kinds of challenges that we're going to have to think about if we're asking people to go back to work.
Small businesses hurting during this stay-at-home order. The federal government offered help, but that money quickly ran out. Up next, Senator Rubio addresses your concerns with the Paycheck Protection Program.